Um, Arizona just passed immigration legislation that violates human rights. So I was just wondering, under your leadership, how would Texas address this issue in a humane way?
Yeah. Well, don't know whether you have been following the papers lately, but let's make clear on this. Arizona, say the states can't pass their own immigration laws. That's reserved to the Constitution, to the federal government. Do you want a reality-based answer? Should I give you a reality-based answer? Here's a reality-based answer. You have people who work for local police. How many police do y'all have? 360. 369 local police. And then you have people in the sheriff's, and I don't know how many sheriff's deputies they have, but some work in the jail, and then some work in the areas outside, about 320. Some work in jail, some work in the unincorporated areas. And here's what we want our law enforcement to do. And I'm telling you, I know this, and it cuts across party lines. In Houston, I made law enforcement the #1 priority, public safety the #1 priority. It went up from 60 to 67% of our operating budget after debt service in the city of Houston. We brought crime rates down. I've had more police, a larger police organization reporting to me than any other person in the state of Texas for 6 years. Okay? Now, what do you want them to do? This is what you want them to do. They need to respond to 911 calls. They need to be on patrol, with a fair amount of that in the higher crime areas. Where there is a crime, they need to investigate that crime. They need to find out who committed the crime by investigative techniques, fingerprint, DNA, forensics, and the old-fashioned way of getting tips and doing investigations. Accumulating the evidence at crime scenes. Seeing if they can get somebody who may have been known to a term. They need to then, once they have identified the suspect, question the suspect, or if they have rights not to, then they need to put together a file and decide to arrest the suspect, and then they need to have the case prepared for the DA, have a fair trial, and if the person committed some bad crime, they ought to be sentenced, and they ought to go to prison. That's what our police ought to be doing, and sheriffs ought to be doing. That's not going to solve all the criminal problems. There's issues in narcotics and offender reentry that we can discuss. But let's talk about, because the most basic civil right of all person is not to be free of violent crime, right? I mean, that's a very basic civil right. There's nobody's going to break into your house, nobody's going to rape you, nobody's going to stab you. That's a very basic right. That's what our police should be doing. Anything that diverts them from that job means the crime rate's going to go up, period. That's it. Now, let me say here, people in Lubbock, and people in Austin, people in Dallas, people in Plainview. Well, I don't know about Plainview, I was going to say every day, but every day, certainly every week, the Lubbock Police Department arrests and incarcerates undocumented people. Period. They do. And they do for committing crimes. And then what the city of Houston did is if people don't have identification when they're booked, we fingerprint them and we run them against national databases, including the FBI database and a program that I pushed to do, that the Obama administration has been implementing. It has been called Secure Communities, where you can identify and see if somebody had, you can check the citizenship status and whether they had previously been convicted of a crime. They're non-citizen. In which case, we really need, after the incarceration, to deport people after they've been convicted of a crime, if they're a non-citizen. And most of us agree with that. And nobody agrees with it more, by the way, than some of the hardworking immigrant communities that are the #1. We have a disproportionate number of minorities in our state that are victims of crime. And they agree with me on this. So that's how we ought to be using our criminal resources. And we don't want anybody to call up 911 and say, hey, listen, I'm sorry, but somebody's going around and trying to tell the people in the, at McDonald's, we station them at the fast food restaurants to check to see who's a citizen or not. And the other thing I'd like to say is, how many people here today have their passports or birth certificates with them? Could you raise your hand? Oh my gosh, y'all are all suspects.